Janeway pulled out a pad, switched it on, and held it out to Spock. We've prepared a list of the files we want and a series of technical topics for which we need further information before determining what other files we'll add. Spock made no effort to take the pad. I have not come here to reveal the secrets of Starfleet technology. Kirk saw the angry look that flashed between Janeway and Taval. Instantly, he stepped forward. Why don't you give us a moment to straighten out the miscommunication? Ambassador, Scotty, will you join me on the balcony? Spock rose to his feet. I assure you, I am aware of no miscommunication. Kirk ushered his two friends through the sliding glass doors. As Janeway and Taval glared at him, he slid the doors shut. Spock, I don't think you realize how serious my guests are. On the contrary, Captain, I do not believe you realize what a critical question their presence raises, especially in regard to the Prime Directive. Spock, the Prime Directive has no bearing on this. I've already interfered in their natural development. I have to set it straight. Spock folded his hands behind his back and looked out at the city lights beyond. Jim, by your own analysis, the Janeway, Taval, and Spock of the Mirror Universe are losing a desperate battle. Were you or I in such a situation, would we not say or do anything in an attempt to reclaim victory? Kirk knew better than to argue with a Vulcan. All right, Spock. What's going on? The picture of Vulcan innocence, Spock turned to Kirk. I merely came in response to an urgent communique from the Starfleet Command, asking me to meet you here on Earth. That is the extent of what is going on. I don't understand, Spock. Why don't you want to give your counterpart the technical secrets that could help free billions of humans and Vulcans from lives of slavery and despair? Scott stared at Spock. You don't seem to be yourself, sir. That's for certain. Spock looked mildly insulted. In what way, Captain Scott? You're like Jim here. You never let the Prime Directive stand in your way before, if you thought justice was not being served. Spock looked away from Kirk, his gaze following the lazy flight of a distant orbital shuttle. Then Kirk realized the obvious. Whatever Spock knew, whatever he was hiding, he had known it before setting out for Earth. Jim, I truly regret these present circumstances, but all I am at liberty to say is, go back to Chow. Go home. You're no longer part of Starfleet. You should not think about returning to the Mirror Universe and trying to right ancient wrongs. Spock, believe me, there's nothing more I want to do than get on the next liner back to Chow. I want to ask Talani to marry me. And the last thing I want to do is go back to the Mirror Universe. But I have to. What harm is there in telling these people what they want to know? If I can give them the tools they need to do their own fighting, I owe them that much. Spock looked up at the handful of stars above. I cannot help you, and I am sorry. Kirk felt anger well up in him. He was convinced there was some other factor at work here, and Spock would not reveal enough to let Kirk know what the rules of the game were. Then, I am sorry if I have interfered with something more important you're involved in. Spock turned away from the railing. Starfleet Command would like to offer you transportation home by starship. I have no intention of going home, Spock. Spock responded to the challenge in Kirk's voice. You no longer have the clearance to obtain the information they request. Scott fairly blustered at Spock's threat. Now see here, Mr. Ambassador. Kirk interrupted. It's all right, Scotty. I have other friends in this century. And I'm sure Captain Picard has more than enough authority to try to help billions of innocent beings regain their freedom. Kirk started toward the sliding doors, but Spock didn't let him take more than 3 steps. Jim, wait. You won't be able to find Captain Picard. Spock looked troubled. I am under strict Starfleet orders. 8 days ago, Starfleet received information that the Enterprise had located the USS Voyager. Scott's eyes flashed with genuine excitement. The Voyager's back! Spock shook his head. Mr. Scott, the real Voyager, it seems, remains in the Delta Quadrant. Starfleet intelligence believes the Enterprise encountered a duplicate Voyager. In short, stolen plans. Starfleet intelligence believes the Terran resistance is responsible for those attempts and has succeeded in creating a mirror universe Voyager. Kirk interrupted. What happened to Jean-Luc? That is unknown, Captain. Starfleet dispatched a high-speed fighter wing to the Enterprise's last reported position. Both the Voyager and the Enterprise were gone. The quantum signature of the warp particles left in the Voyager's wake confirms that it is from another quantum reality. Scott stared at Spock. Could the warp trails be traced? No, Captain Scott. Either both ships employed a warp particle containment field to mask their trails, or... Kirk didn't wait for Spock to finish. Or both ships are now in the mirror universe. Spock nodded. You see my dilemma, Jim. The three people sitting beyond those doors could very well be involved in the hijacking of Starfleet's most powerful, and, in the wrong hands, deadliest starship. Spock, why didn't you tell me all that in the beginning? But I know the answer. You think I might be involved. The truth is, you don't trust me. Spock chose his words carefully. Starfleet feels that, at best, you are compromised in this matter. Spock had evidently decided he had said enough. Kirk looked over his shoulder at the sliding glass doors. They were covered by sheer curtains that glowed with the light of the suite. Kirk was a bit surprised that Janeway hadn't come marching through those doors. Spock, they're not going to respond well to being refused. We could be in danger. Spock removed a Starfleet comm badge from his robes. The moment we stepped onto this balcony, Janeway, Taval, and my counterpart were beamed to detention cells on space dock. Kirk felt the bitter shock of betrayal. Why didn't you beam me up too? Spock fixed Kirk with an unblinking gaze. Starfleet wanted to. I convinced them otherwise. You are free to go, provided you go to Chow. Kirk spun around before Spock could say anything more. He ignored Scott's plea to return. He strode to the doors, slid them open, and stepped through the suddenly billowing white curtains. The chairs were empty. Spock had meant what he'd said. Then he realized that one person still remained in the suite. A slightly built man at the bar, in Starfleet's latest uniform, appeared to be mixing a drink. Kirk felt a shock of surprise as he suddenly recognized him. Bones? At 148 years old, Dr. Leonard McCoy's hand trembled slightly as he held up what could only be a mint julep. Hi there, Jim. I was beginning to wonder if Spock was going to be keeping you out there all night. Kirk crossed the suite and held back from hugging McCoy only because he looked so frail. Kirk was afraid he might injure him. I can't believe that I'm still alive, Jim. No. I can't believe you look so good. Kirk gestured at McCoy's legs. The last time I saw you, you had the exoskeleton. Well, it's implants now. Artificial muscles grafted over my own. I'm not a doctor anymore. I'm a medical experiment. Kirk was overcome, but he was also suspicious. So, are you in on this too? McCoy looked toward the balcony as Spock and Scott entered. In on what? Kirk sighed. All right. Somebody better tell me what's going on, Bones. What are you doing here? Bad news, I'm afraid, Jim. From Chow. Someone took Telani. Who took her where? No one knows. There was a message left telling you that if you helped the intendant, Telani would be, well, they'd kill Telani. And if you want Telani back, they will trade. Starfleet wants to talk to you, Jim. I don't care what Starfleet wants, Bones. I've had it with Starfleet's bureaucracy and channels. Someone has Telani, and I'm going to get her back. It's as simple as that. Scott looked from McCoy to Spock and back again. Well, you'll never be going alone. McCoy put his drink down on the bar. Well, I haven't done anything exciting in... I can't count that high. I'm in. Kirk looked at his friend. Bones, no. At your age. At my age, I've got so many damn artificial body parts that if someone cut off my head, the only difference be that my bedside manner would show a remarkable improvement. Spock interrupted. May I inject a note of reason into these ill-considered proceedings? But Kirk had no more time to waste. No, Mr. Spock, you may not. I've had it with reason. This time, I'm just going to get the job done. Kirk started for the door, aware that McCoy and Scott were following close behind. Hand on the doorknob, Kirk looked back at Spock. What about it, Spock? Are you coming with me? Jim, whatever your feelings toward me are right now, I have a ship. Kirk hesitated, tempted. What kind of a ship? You may inspect it yourself. Spock to Sovereign. 4 to beam up. There were conditions for saving Tilani, of course. With Starfleet, there were always conditions. On the bridge of the Sovereign, Fleet Admiral Alina Nechayev had, with an insincere smile, given Kirk exactly 30 seconds to make his decision. He said he'd rejoin, but as a captain. Nechayev had agreed as if that had been her plan all along. She then told Kirk, as well as Spock, Scott, and McCoy, to join her in the observation lounge. Once they were there, Kirk was aware of Nechayev watching him, waiting for him to dare to interrupt her opening statement. This is how the mission will proceed. We are en route to the Mirror Voyager's last known position near the Golden Discontinuity, and will arrive in 3 days. We will then track the Enterprise and the Mirror Voyager to locate the mechanism, artificial or natural, which serves as the link between our universe and... Kirk opened his mouth to protest, and the Admiral made no attempt to hide her anger. What is it, Captain Kirk? I believe we're forgetting there's a woman's life at risk. Nechayev forced her fine features into a false smile. There are potentially billions of lives at risk, Captain. But Tilani is the key. Whoever took Tilani wants to conduct a trade. Intendant Spock, Janeway, T'Val, they're on this ship. Let's make that trade. Nechayev rocked back in her chair. The famous Captain Kirk, hero of his century, wants to give up so quickly? Captain, if we find the crossover mechanism and either destroy it or take control of it while the kidnappers are in our universe, they will be cut off from escape and more willing to deal. Kirk pounded his fist on the table. They'll be cut off and desperate and more willing to kill their hostage. We're dealing with people your Starfleet knows nothing about. They're ruthless, unswayed by logic. Nechayev turned to Spock. Before I have Kirk escorted from my bridge, explain to him, Admiral Spock, that Starfleet's plan is logical. The plan is quite logical. The beings who captured Tilani are not. Thus, I must agree with Captain Kirk that the plan stands little chance of success. Kirk stared at Nechayev in dawning comprehension. You have no intention of helping me save Tilani. Nechayev shook her head at him. No matter what you think of us in this century, we're not monsters. We will do all we can to save Tilani after the security of the Federation has been assured. Kirk started for the door. Spock pulled out McCoy's chair, helped him stand. Nechayev said before Kirk could leave, Captain, Starfleet did invite you on this mission for a reason other than the one you imagine. Starfleet would be most appreciative if during the next few days you could speak with the 3 intruders to help develop our understanding of their universe. If I refuse, do you have a plank on this ship I could walk? Nechayev did not respond to his sarcasm. The choice is yours, Captain Kirk. Kirk walked out, not waiting to be dismissed. He knew what he had to do. And to save Tilani, he had only 3 days in which to do it. Kirk gazed out at the magnificent vista of Yosemite National Park as it could only be seen at sunset from the summit of El Capitan. Behind him was Janeway. I could kill you, Kirk. You could try, Kate, but suddenly Janeway's hands struck Kirk's shoulders with the force of a charging targ, knocking him into a fatal 1-kilometer fall.
Warning. Physical risk parameters exceeded. Safety overrides engaged.
Kirk felt solid ground beneath his feet. When he looked down, there was still nothing to see below his feet except air, but he could walk on it. Janeway stood at the edge of the summit, hands on her hips, distinctly disappointed that he was not plunging to his death. "As I was saying, you could try, but the holodeck won't let you." Kirk walked through the air to return to the simulated granite. Janeway looked away as if stricken with a sudden wave of unbearable sorrow. Kirk was genuinely concerned. In the past 3 days, he had come to see Janeway as more than an enemy to be manipulated as he worked to achieve his own goals. "What is it, Kate?" "I was just trying to think of the technology that goes into something like this. Do you know what that says about a culture if it can afford to expend all those resources on entertainment? No hunger, no disease, no war." She no longer reminded Kirk of the grim-faced soldier in a combat suit who had kidnapped him more than a week ago. "Kate, Starfleet's not the enemy. I believe you think Starfleet is your enemy as much as it's mine. Kate, I believe Starfleet is simply trying to discover the truth behind your presence here and the disappearance of the Enterprise." Janeway looked directly into Kirk's eyes. "I told you why we were here. I told you we know nothing about the Enterprise or the Mirror Voyager." Then Janeway reached out, took his face in her hands, and forcefully kissed him. Her body pressed close against his. For an instant, Kirk's body responded. There was a quixotic fire in this woman of the kind that always drew him. But as quickly as that wellspring of passion rose within him to meet her advance, his heart rebelled. He pushed her away. "No." She drew the finger of one hand across his face, across his lips. "You really do love her, don't you, Kirk?" Love seemed such a small word to express what he had found with Talani. "I really do. Help me get her back." Janeway didn't play any games. "Help me get the Intendant and Taval back to where we belong with the information we need." Kirk held out his hand to accept her challenge and seal the bargain. They shook hands. Not as man and woman, but as soldiers, allies. And now that their alliance had been forged, the war for each of their worlds' survival was about to begin. Kirk and Janeway made their way through the thick trunks of the pine trees. They stepped into a clearing, pine needles and small twigs crackling under their boots, to join the others as they had planned. Spock, McCoy, and Scott, all sitting uncomfortably on fallen logs. Taval standing by the hover chair, which placed the mirror Spock as close as possible to the rock-ringed fire. Taval was as angry as a Vulcan could appear to be in public. "Kirk, as impressive as this holographic technology is, recreation is inappropriate at this time." Janeway intervened. "It's all right, Taval. Kirk and I were establishing some ground rules." McCoy chuckled. "Oh, is that what they're calling it these days?" Kirk frowned at McCoy. "Bones, behave yourself." Then Kirk simply concentrated on the fire and its welcome warmth. He began to remember the fires he had shared with Talani in their clearing on Chow, making love beneath the stars. The mirror Spock suddenly announced, "Dr. McCoy has informed me that I am dying of Bendai syndrome." Kirk didn't understand the diagnosis. "Intendant Spock, from what I know of Bendai, you're far too young to exhibit signs of the disease, let alone to be dying of it." McCoy shook his head sadly. "That's in our universe, Jim. Healthy Vulcan today would have to be over 200 years old before the disease would manifest. But the Intendant, he had a different life from most Vulcans we know. Incredible stress, war wounds, poor nutrition. All of those can speed up the appearance of the disease." The Intendant's hands played with the edge of the plaid blanket that was folded over his legs. He stared into the flames as if seeing another world. Scott expressed his confusion. "What I don't understand, Spock, is how so many things could be the same in the two universes, and yet everything is still so different." Spock had obviously given the question much thought. "There is ample evidence, Mr. Scott, to suggest that there are an infinite number of universes existing in parallel with one another. Presumably, all these universes share a common moment of origin as a single reality. But then, for each event which follows, for which there might be multiple outcomes, those universes branch off from one another." Kirk looked up. But Spock, if there are an infinite number of universes constantly branching off from one another, what is it that links us with the mirror universe so that people in both can keep slipping back and forth between just these two and no others? Spock walked over to stand by his mirror double. My counterpart and I have discussed in great depth the history of both our realities, and until relatively modern times, those histories are virtually identical. The mirror Spock continued. But today, our two universes are quite different, primarily because of the radically different actions undertaken by your Federation and my Empire and Alliance. Spock added, however, since these differences were not as profound at the time of the first crossover, that suggests that by continuing to trace the divergent world lines back through time, we might reach a point somewhere in the recent past, perhaps no more than 2 or 3 centuries, when both universes were, in fact, identical. The mirror Spock nodded thoughtfully. A point when one singular pivotal event took place that had at least 2 probable outcomes, one of which led to the development of a benign and democratic federation, the other to a militaristic and repressive empire. Janeway picked up a twig to stoke the fire. We want to go home, back to our universe, with the technical files we need to fight the Alliance. Kirk wants to rescue Talani. If we help him, he'll help us. Kirk watched Spock carefully. Whatever misgivings Spock might have, his old friend was giving him the benefit of the doubt, for now. But Taval had no reservations about voicing her disapproval. Kirk betrayed us once. How can you know he will not do so again? Scott exhaled in noisy frustration. Captain Kirk, perhaps it would help if you would tell us how you can prove they're not involved with the hijacking. I can't do that, Scotty, but Spock can. Kirk looked to his friend. You are suggesting a mind meld, and my counterpart and I have discussed it, Captain. But our minds are so similar, even to a molecular level, that there is the danger we would become locked in a recursive neural iteration. The loss of our separate identities might result when the meld is broken. Kirk shrugged. Taval, then. Vulcan mind to Vulcan mind, no secrets. But Spock shook his head. It could be possible that Taval is far more adept than I, in which case I would emerge from the meld saying that they are innocent of any attempt on the Enterprise. Janeway interrupted. Then do it to me. I'm only human. No Vulcan mind tricks. Spock considered the option. Very well. Are you ready? Janeway grinned. Try me. Spock raised his hands to Janeway's face, the tips of his long fingers searching out, then finding her Catra points. My mind to your mind. Our thoughts are one. Kirk motioned to the others to move away, to leave Spock and Janeway undisturbed. After some time, Spock and Janeway approached them. Janeway moved slowly, as if recovering from some overwhelming physical exertion. Spock wasted no time. Your conclusions were correct, Captain. Catherine Janeway is not connected to the arrival of the Mirror Voyager, nor to the disappearance of the Enterprise. There is no room for deception within her. McCoy had no fear of being blunt. What about the other two, Spock? Any chance they've been lying to her? I detected no pattern of falsehood, Doctor. And through that link, I am also aware that my counterpart has melded with Janeway in the past, and with Taval, daughter of Spock. Now everyone looked at Taval, and suddenly Kirk understood the 100 small gestures of caring and protection Taval had offered the mirror Spock. Not as someone respecting her superior officer, but as a daughter caring for her sick father. And Kirk also understood the unsettled emotions he was sensing in his friend. The path not taken. But Kirk saw there was something else that was troubling his friend. What is it, Spock? Spock looked at Janeway as if asking permission to proceed. Kirk saw the slight nod she gave him. Catherine was once held in an Alliance prison camp, a special camp for those humans who had counterparts in this universe. Kirk looked questioningly at Janeway, then again at Spock. What was the purpose of the camp? Catherine was never told, but from the conditions she remembers, it appears obvious. Infiltration. Janeway added, "About a year and a half ago, they came for me. They told me I wasn't needed anymore." Spock explained further. The timing corresponds to the final conclusion of the Board of Inquiry investigation into Voyager's disappearance in our universe. With her counterpart, Captain Janeway, presumed dead, the Mirror Janeway was slated to be reassigned to a labor camp, but she got away during the transfer. To Kirk, there was even more to Spock's revelation than explaining Janeway's past. Spock, if the Alliance knew exactly when Starfleet ruled on Voyager's loss, if they knew who among their Terran slaves had counterparts here... Spock nodded. It does suggest that they maintain close watch on the developments in our universe, most likely through a sophisticated network of counterparts who have taken the place of their duplicates. Scott muttered in shocked disbelief. McCoy nervously rubbed his thumb over his folded fingers. And Kirk saw the unexpected solution to what had been a frustrating mystery. "I have a theory, Spock." Spock knew Kirk too well. "And I concur, Captain." Kirk turned to the mystified faces of McCoy and Scott and the three rebels from the Mirror Universe. The Sovereign may already be under enemy control. Kirk watched as McCoy moved efficiently around the Sovereign's spacious sickbay and brought all his skill and experience to bear on the terrible disease that ravaged Spock's counterpart. Kirk had invited Admiral Nechayev to speak with Intendant Spock before McCoy began his treatment. Kirk had told Nechayev there was a chance the Intendant would be unconscious for days, but that he was willing to answer any questions she might have about the Mirror Universe to put her at her ease. Admiral Nechayev frowned at Kirk. "I thought there was no cure for Bentai." "True, Admiral, but Dr. McCoy is convinced he can induce a remission by treating some of the Intendant's other infirmities." Nechayev seemed unconcerned. "We'll be arriving at the search coordinates within the hour, so let's get this over with." She strode over to the Mirror Spock's bedside. "Kirk says you have something to tell me." "The captain informed me that you had many questions about my reality. I offer to answer them to the best of my ability." "Why?" The Mirror Spock shifted in his bed. "Your Starfleet has, in effect, abducted me and my companions. You are preventing us from completing our mission here." "You mean stealing Starfleet secrets?" "Nothing so drastic. We only wish to copy computer files to obtain information that will have no effect on your universe. Nothing here would change." "But your universe would change." "That is my intention." Nechayev seemed to be losing patience. "Let's start at the beginning. What is the composition of the Terran resistance?" The Mirror Spock raised both eyebrows and shook his head. "I do not know." "I thought you were its leader." "Not of the Terran resistance. I serve as a figurehead for the Vulcan resistance." Nechayev shrugged. "All right, tell me about the Vulcan resistance. How do you communicate?" "Each member of a single cell has knowledge of only one other cell. Messages are passed blindly in that manner." No, that's not what I meant. I'm trying to get an understanding of your level of technology." The Mirror Spock shifted his gaze to look at her. "Why?" The Admiral didn't look away. "To understand what might happen to the status quo in your universe if certain components of Starfleet technology were to be released to you." "You would do that?" "It's not up to me. But there is a small group within Starfleet who believe, as does Captain Kirk, that the natural development of your civilization has been so hopelessly compromised by contact with us that further intervention is not prohibited under the Prime Directive." Kirk was surprised by the Admiral's sudden candor. He was even more surprised as the Mirror Spock began to detail the organization and technological capabilities of the Vulcan resistance. Spock's counterpart named the top 7 leaders whom he had met personally. He explained how their training camp on Mars was disguised by a cloaking device salvaged from a damaged Romulan vessel. By the time the Mirror Spock was finishing, McCoy had returned to his patient's bedside with a tray of hyposprays. He carried a flashing medical tricorder and kept using it to check readings on the Intendant. The Mirror Spock finished. He licked his dry lips. "Is that helpful, Admiral?" Nechayev patted the side of the mirror Spock's bed. "I wish you good luck with your treatment." Then the Admiral left. As soon as the sickbay door slipped shut, the mirror Spock pushed himself up to sit on the side of the bed. McCoy flipped open his tricorder with a practiced flick of his wrist. "Her quantum signature matches the intendant. She's not the real Admiral." Kirk helped the mirror Spock to his feet. "Tell me, you didn't reveal actual information about the Vulcan resistance?" The mirror Spock raised an eyebrow. "Why would the Vulcan resistance maintain a training camp on Mars?" McCoy held up a hypospray with an ampule filled with dark blue liquid. "One shot of this and she'll sleep for a week. I say we get her on the bridge." "Doctor, there are more than 1,000 crew members on this ship. Some of them are bound to be counterparts, and we don't have time to scan them all." "Jim, we're just supposed to leave her in command?" "She's Starfleet's problem, not mine." McCoy rolled his eyes. "So, what's the captain's pleasure?" Kirk had already given that careful thought. "The Sovereign's carrying runabouts. They're for Starbase 210, but they're fully operational. All we have to do is make it to the Golden Discontinuity. Even the Sovereign can't find us in there." McCoy stared hard at Kirk. "We?" The mirror Spock spoke. "It is not wise to leave Nechayev from my universe in command of this ship. However, within 4.26 hours, Nechayev will have learned from the other Alliance operatives that the information I gave her concerning the Vulcan resistance was false, at which point our lives are forfeit. Thus, logic dictates we do as Captain Kirk suggests, get off this ship in the most expedient manner possible." McCoy faced Kirk. "And, how does stealing a runabout and disappearing into the discontinuity help Telani?" "We can then go on to Charlebones. I can get that message from whoever kidnapped her. I can respond to it myself, track them down, set a trap. Anything is better than being a prisoner on this ship and doing nothing." Kirk, McCoy, and the mirror Spock started for the sickbay doors. When they had stepped into the corridor, they faced 5 phaser rifles held by security officers. Admiral Nechayev stepped forward and took McCoy's medikit. "Your use of the tricorder was very clumsy, Doctor. And don't look surprised, Kirk. Where I come from, so many studies were written about Tiberius, analyzing him, deconstructing him, trying to understand why he became what he became. I almost feel as if I know you. And I certainly can predict every move you make." She waved her hand at her security team, and Kirk knew without question they were all counterparts, just like the Admiral. "Take the Intendant and McCoy to the brig. But, Captain Kirk, I will personally escort him to the agony booth." In that instant, Kirk was aware of everything. And at the core of everything he experienced, at the core of everything he had become, there was Telani. He looked directly into the cold stare of Alina Nechayev, a human collaborator from some other reality. His mind raced with all the possibilities before him. The agony booth did not concern him. The action he took was quickly determined. He drove his open hand into Nechayev's jaw, hearing the satisfying splinter of her teeth as she was knocked back into the corridor bulkhead. He spun to kick away the closest phaser rifle. It was not a kick of his youth, but his aim was perfect. The mirror Spock joined Kirk's attack. His hand found the shoulder of the middle rifleman and dropped him with a nerve pinch. By then, however, the element of surprise was gone. Kirk and the mirror Spock faced 2 riflemen. They could not be allowed to fire. "Computer, security alert. Suppress weapons fire in corridor B, deck 8. Authorization Kirk." The riflemen fired. Too late. Their weapons had been suppressed. Kirk and the mirror Spock were on them in moments, and they soon lay inert on the corridor floor. Kirk turned to check on the status of the first combatants. McCoy was already dispensing the blue liquid from his hypospray. "Help me get them into sickbay, Jim." Kirk and the mirror Spock began dragging the defeated attackers and their weapons into sickbay, placing the unconscious security officers and the Admiral on treatment beds. Then McCoy said, "Computer, activate the EMH." A holographic doctor rippled into view in the center of the sickbay. "Please state the nature of the medical emergency." McCoy responded quickly. These people are spies who intend to take over the Sovereign and deliver her into enemy hands. Treat them as necessary for minor injuries, but keep them unconscious until new personnel arrive from Starfleet Command. The hologram seemed taken aback at the sight of one of his patients. That's not a spy. That's Admiral Achayev. McCoy growled. Check her quantum signature. She's not from this universe. Get to work and follow orders. The hologram drew himself up in a huff. Very well, but I don't have to be happy about it. Kirk picked up one of the phaser rifles, checked its charge readout. Full. Come on, Bones. Intendant, let's move it. We're on borrowed time as it is. They walked quickly along the corridor to a turbolift alcove. Kirk smiled as he waved his phaser rifle toward the empty turbolift car. You go first, Bones, just in case it's a trap. Grumbling, McCoy entered the lift with the mirror Spock. Kirk followed them. Main shuttle bay. McCoy looked at Kirk. Is that where we're going to meet Scott? Kirk nodded. And Janeway, and Taval, and Spock. McCoy frowned. You've been busy. Bones, I do my best. Only 10 meters of corridor separated the nearest turbolift alcove from the large doors leading to the main shuttle bay. There was no one in the corridor, and that was immediately suspicious. They were 5 meters from the shuttle bay doors when Kirk thought they were going to make it. And that was when the first force field went up. A second force field shimmered into view just before the lift alcove. They were trapped, only a few steps from freedom. Kirk hefted the rifle in his hand, getting ready to swing it as a club if given the opportunity. Why don't they show themselves? A harsh voice answered from his comm badge. Because we're trying to wake the Admiral, so she can take charge of you personally. Then McCoy pointed past the shuttle bay doors. From that direction, along the corridor, 3 figures were approaching. Kirk felt a knot of anger grow in his stomach. There were Cardassians aboard the Sovereign. The largest Cardassian stepped up to the force field, smiled coldly, and withdrew a small cylindrical communicator. This is Arcot. I have found the prisoner on Deck 7, outside the main shuttle bay. Scan the bay for the others. Kirk knew the Cardassians had 3 options. Kill them here, beam them to detention, or march them there physically. A Cardassian voice replied over the communicator, Scan complete. No life signs detected in main shuttle bay. Where are your accomplices? Kirk feigned ignorance. What accomplices? Arcot smiled broadly. So like Tiberius. Arcot raised the communicator again. What is the status of the Admiral? The EMH will not allow us into sickbay. He claims he must wait for authorization from Starfleet Command. Delete his program from the computer. Glenn Arcot. The EMH has linked his program to the life support subsystems, keeping the Admiral and 5 security officers in medical stasis. If I delete the program, the Admiral will die. Kirk had no idea how a mere computer program could be so creative, but he decided to increase the stakes. Don't look so surprised, Arcot. You're dealing with superior technology. None of you compared to the Federation. Arcot lunged forward. Drop the shields, you will die, Tiberius. But his soldiers stopped him, pulled him back. No, Glenn. They are to remain within the force field at all times. Gul Ratal's orders. Kirk made a note of that new information. Gul Ratal must be the Cardassian in charge. Glenn Arcot shrugged off his soldier's grip on his arm, drew his disruptor, and fired. The ship's weapon suppression system had obviously been adjusted to ignore Cardassian weapons. The disruptor beam hit the security screen full force, sending out ripples of dissipative energy across a vertical plane. Kirk sneered. Is that how backward your scientists are? They can't even design a simple polyphasic disruptor to penetrate a pitifully weak security screen? Arcot burned with rage. Transporter control, this is Glenn Arcot. Lock onto James T. Kirk, 1 meter in front of me. He's the human with the phaser rifle. Preliminary lock established. I will have to drop the shields to engage a full lock and transport. Arcot did not take his hate-filled gaze from Kirk. Do so on my command. Destination? Space. And keep the beam focused. I want him alive when he materializes, so he knows what's happening. Instantly, McCoy grabbed Kirk's arm. If you send him, you send me. A moment later, the mirror Spock did the same. And me. But before Arcot could respond, Kirk pushed McCoy and the intendant away.
Keep fighting.
Arcot snarled in triumph.
Drop shields and energize.
Kirk lunged forward, but before his hands could reach Arcot's throat, the Cardassian and the corridor began to break apart in shimmers of golden energy. As the glow of the transporter effect washed away the protective cocoon of the Sovereign, Kirk braced himself for the bite of vacuum, the cold of space, and for the final darkness of death.